Okay. All right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ba'd. So let's begin. So welcome back to another session of the Quran study class. Inshallah, we have completed Surah Al-Baqarah and we have completed Surat. What was the other surah we completed? Anybody? Yes, Jabir. Al-Imran. Very good. And now, hold on. Questions at the end, inshallah. So now we're moving on to the next surah, which is Suratun, chapter number 4. Does anyone know? Suratun Nisa. Very good. So we're going to be covering Suratun Nisa and a little bit about Suratun Nisa. There are 24 sections in it, and there are 176 verses. Now, when we looked at Surah Al-Baqarah and Al-Imran, I mentioned that these two surahs are kind of like a pair. Why are they a pair? They're both long, they're both Medinan, and they have a similar style in the surah. So if you look at the beginning of the surah, they start with letters. If you look at what the content is in the beginning, you look at what the content is in the end, that there's a dua and all of that. They're very similar throughout, as well as particularly in the beginning and end, and the way in which the words are put together. Surah An-Nisa, chapter 4, and the following surah after that, number 5. Does anyone know what surah 5 is? Ma'idah. So, Nisa and Ma'idah, they're also like a pair. They're also both Medinan. They have similar style. They have some similar themes as well. So that is a little bit about Surah An-Nisa. So Nisa means women, plural. W-O-M-E-N, the women. And usually, I mentioned this before, usually a surah title is a label that mentions one incident in the entire long surah. Surah An-Nisa is kind of an exception to that rule, where it's not just a label with one incident, but it's kind of talking about a theme about lots of rules pertaining to women. There's also rules pertaining to men, but there's a lot of rules pertaining to women, and that's what makes Surah An-Nisa a little bit unique. And also what makes it unique is, so it makes it unique within the names of other surahs throughout the Quran. What also makes it unique compared to all other religious scriptures is that the focus on women and rulings regarding women is something that you don't find in other religions and other philosophies throughout history. You find that women were oftentimes mostly neglected or not considered to be worthy of mention in detail, or they were actually degraded and they were looked down upon and treated as subhuman or beings that have like a inferior status. I'll give you a simple example. Christianity, there's many religions, but Christianity is a good example. There was, in the 16th century, the Council of Trent. The Council of Trent, actually, this group of Christians had a discussion, a very detailed, long, scholarly discussion to decide whether women have a soul or not. And they said, we're not really sure. So their conclusion was, we're inconclusive. We're not exactly sure, whether they have one or not. And we're talking about the 16th century. We're talking about over 1,000 years after the Quran was revealed. And someone may come along and say, you know what? That's just some minor little tiny group or whatever it may be. So actually, I like this scholar. He takes all of these things into consideration. So he talks about this council was held from December 13th, 1545 to December 4th, 1563. Okay, over years they're discussing this issue, and then in the Catholic dictionary, right? This is of the church themselves. They said it would be hard to exaggerate the importance of the Council of Trent. So this is not some random group of people hanging out in a coffee shop having this discussion. This is the Catholic Church officially having a massive meeting, and one of the most important topics of their agenda is whether women have a soul or not. Now, if you look at that and you make that a comparison between what Allah is talking about 1,000 years prior to that, in the Quran, it's a really big deal if we understand the context correctly. So let's begin with Surat An-Nisa. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what? The reference, this is the Catholic dictionary, and the Council of Trent, the comment is a book by Faubat called Love, Marriage, and Jealousy, page 371. Okay. All right. So section 1 of Surah An-Nisa, it begins. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة. People, be mindful of your Lord who created you from a single soul. So basically Allah is talking to all people now. He's not just addressing the believers. He's addressing all humanity and saying, remember that you should be mindful of Allah, and Allah is the one, your Lord is the one who created everyone from a single soul. So why is it significant to remind people that there came from one soul? Because it teaches us that humanity has one origin. And one of the reasons why people start going into division and start getting jealous of each other and thinking one group is superior to another group is because they think we're different. You're from that group and I'm from this group. And Allah is reminding everyone that everyone is actually from the same group. So there's no need to get into this idea of excessive tribalism where you start looking down upon other groups and other people. وَخَلَقَ مِنْهَا زَوْجَهَا, and He created from it its mate. So the first one is talking about Adam. And then afterwards, He created the mate for Adam, which is Eve, Hawa. وَبَثَّ مِنْهُمَا رِجَالًا كَثِيرًا وَنِسَاءً. Through both He spread many men and women. So through Adam and Eve, He spread so many different people. Basically not people. Every single person is coming from the original one couple. And that means that we all have a common origin. And if we have a common origin, then we need to take that into consideration. Because people care about those type of things. Right? People who have common origins, they care. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ الَّذِي تَسَاءَلُونَ بِهِ وَالْأَرْحَامِ. Be mindful of Allah, in whose name you appeal to one another. When people swear, they're like, who do they call upon? They call upon Allah. Say, by Allah, wallahi this or wallahi that. So He says, you appeal to one another by using Allah's name, because you recognize how important Allah is. So be mindful of Allah, in whose name you appeal to one another. Wal arham. So it carries over. Wattaqu al arham. Meaning be mindful of family relationships. Take them very seriously. So this verse in the beginning here, it kind of starts to set the foundation, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna Allah kana alaykum raqiba. Allah is always watchful over you. And He's watching every single thing that you're doing. If you're not being mindful of Allah, and you're doing stuff that you shouldn't be doing, or you're not taking care of family relationships, then Allah is watching that. So look at the connection here. First, Allah mentions that He created all of us from one, and then created the mate, and everyone else descends from this couple. And then He says that you should be mindful of Allah and you should be good to family. Being good to family means that the connection between, you're all from the same family. But then later on down the line, this idea of arham means the wombs. So everyone is coming out, unless there's some intervention taking place. Everyone's coming out of a womb of a woman. And this is why Nisa is called Nisa. It's going to talk about a bunch of rules relating to women, but it's saying that, everyone's been created from a male and a female, but the way in which they came out, everyone came out of the womb of a female, basically. And that is the way in which family ties became established. When we talk about blood ties, what is a family? A real family is people who have similar womb in common or similar blood in common, because they're from the same bloodline, even though we go all the way back to the same origin. So Allah is saying, this is your basis for taking care of your family. Now, why is family so important? Some people don't understand the today, many people don't understand the importance of family. Like some things you need to explain, whereas if you ask someone 50 years ago, you didn't need to explain to them why. They're just like, this is so obvious. Why would you explain something to me? Like for example, the idea of like gender. Like there's a male and there's a female. So you don't need to explain that, but today you do need to explain that. So when it comes to family, if you ask somebody 50 years ago, so why is family important? It's not even a question that needs to be explained to most people. But nowadays it needs to be explained. So part of the explanation, we've talked about it before, but part of the explanation is that the family is the building block of society. And if it's a building block of society, if you want your society to be strong, all those building blocks within have to be strong as well. It's like a wall. Someone give a good example. It's like a wall. So if you have a wall is made of these separate individual bricks. Some of the bricks are destroyed, your wall becomes very weak. If those bricks themselves are very weak within in like different parts, your entire wall is going to be very weak. But if those bricks, all components and all parts of the bricks are strong, you're going to find that the wall is strong. It's able to resist whatever's going to happen. Back in the days, you'd have catapults being shot at walls of cities. If you had weakness in the wall, your wall is going to come right down, army's going to invade, and you're done. You're finished. So family is the exact same way. When you have strong families in a society, that society is going to be strong. When you have weak families, where if you call up your family members, hey, I'm in a really difficult situation, can you help me out? I don't have time for you. You? No way, man. Sorry, go ask somebody else. If you have weak families, you're going to have a weak society. Right? So this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioning this. The importance of family in Islam is not something you should take lightly. وَآتُوا الْيَتَامَى أَمْوَالَهُمْ Give orphans their wealth. So now it switches. So it's talking about family, and now it's talking about someone who has lost family. So what's an orphan? An orphan is someone who has lost their family, lost their parents, or more particularly, at least lost their father. This is what it was considered to be, because the father is the one who is going to be financially supporting the family. And what ended up happening, remember, this is a Medinan surah. So there are Muslims who are going out for battle in wars, and they're being killed, and the soldiers are men. And so when somebody loses their, they lose their father, these children need to be taken care of somehow. And wealth is a very important part of being taken care of in every society. So what it's saying is that these children who have become orphans and their father has died, whether it's in battle or some other way, and the father had money and he left behind money, and these orphan children, like let's say the mother's gone too, these young children, says that money belongs to them because they're going to be inheriting from their father and their mother that, when they die. So it says, وَآتُوا الْيَتَامَى أَمْوَالَهُمْ Give orphans their wealth. It's referring to when they become adults. So why would this have to be said? Give orphans their wealth. Because the orphans, if they're young and they're not adults yet, they don't automatically take their money. So who's going to watch their money while these kids are growing up? Someone has to watch it. Someone has to make sure this money gets to these kids when they're able to be responsible. So if you have a 7-year-old kid, and your father just died in the battlefield, and he left behind $100,000, should you, and I'm interested to know what the 7-year-olds have to say, should you give the $100,000 to the 7-year-old? What do you think, Reza? Hold on. What do you think, Reza? Asking you. Any of you? No of you? No opinion. Isa, what do you think? You think no? No? Why not? What would you do if you had $100,000, Isa? What would you do if you had $100,000? I can't hear him. What did he say? You would what? Put some in his bank account. He's been trained well. What would either of you two do if you had $100,000? Yeah? You save it? MashaAllah. These good trained kids here, MashaAllah. Come for the Quran study class. This is beautiful. All right, so the thing is, you have to be careful because some of them, we put some chocolate chip cookies, which we have, inshallah, after the class. Some of them would be like, hey, you know what? We're selling chocolate chip cookies for $1,000. Some of them would be like, those are the best cookies ever, but here's $1,000. So you have to wait till they're mature to be able to give them their money. But then someone else could also come in and try and take that money. So Allah makes it very clear. Make sure that orphans will get their money properly when they reach adulthood, when they become adults. وَلَا تَتَبَدَّلُوا الْخَبِيثَ بِالطَّيِّبِ. Do not substitute the bad for the good. So now we're going to look at some ways in which clever Arabs in the past used to try to take some of the wealth of the orphans. So they don't always leave money. Among the most important valuables that people left behind of type of money were animals. And what type of animals did people have in Arabia?
Horses.
Camels, horses, what else? Sheep, goats, right? So they had all these animals. And what would happen is some of the people who said, you know what, I will take care of, my friend died on the battlefield. I'm going to go ahead and help make sure that all the camels that were left for this child, when he grows up, he's going to get all these camels. I'm going to take care of that. But then some of them, they had this very clever tactic. And these are, again, not only Muslims, these are non-Muslims doing this. So what they would do is they'd say, well, I have some camels too. So I'm going to take care of all these camels. And then when that child grows up and becomes an adult, I'll give them their camels back. But you know what they would do? They would mix the good camels with their bad camels. And then when they grow up, oh, here's some medium quality or give the bad camels to the kid. I'm going to keep the good ones because they're not all the same quality. Right? Not all of them are going to be in the same quality. Right? So he says, وَلَا تَأْكُلُوا أَمْوَالَهُمْ إِلَىٰ أَمْوَالِكُمْ. And do not cheat them by mixing their wealth with your own. Right? So one of them is substituting the good items for the bad items, mixing them around. And the second one is mixing their wealth with your own wealth, and then now you open up the idea of, we were doing business together and this happened and all that. These are all ways to try to get an advantage from the property of orphans. إِنَّهُ كَانَ حُوبًا كَبِيرًا. That would be a great crime. This idea of protecting the weak people in society is extremely important because orphans are susceptible to being taken advantage of. So what does the Quran do? It mentions and it says, you guys better be extra careful when it comes to anyone who has even the slightest susceptibility of being taken advantage of. And it's going to be a really great sin. So taking or misappropriating the property of an orphan is considered one of the major sins in Islam. It's not something minor. This is a major sin in Islam. And then verse 3, it says, وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تُقْسِطُوا فِي الْيَتَامَى فَانْكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ مَثْنَى وَثُلَاثَ وَرُبَاعَ. If you are afraid that you might fail to give orphan women their rights. So we're talking about orphans still, but now it's saying that if you're afraid that you're not going to be able to give orphan women who are under your care their rights, meaning if you choose to marry them. So what people would be doing is they would be taking care of orphan girls. And what would happen is they'd say, well, once she becomes an adult and she grows up and everything, and I've been taking care of her, one other way I can take care of her is by marrying her, because marriage had a very important economic aspect, especially more in primitive societies than in modern societies. So now someone may have an idea and say, we're talking about taking advantage of orphans. So this was another way in which people were saying, so you know what? We can marry these orphans who have a lot of money. So the assumption is they have money. The previous orphans that are being taken advantage of are the ones who have money. These orphans are the ones who have money as well. But then what's going to happen is there is an issue with dowry when it comes to the mahr, which we're going to talk about a little bit. It's a bridal gift. So what people would do is they would try to either somehow take the money from the orphans by marrying them, or they would try to get a reduction in the normal bridal gift dowry that that woman would normally be getting. So Allah is alerting people to that and saying, if you are concerned and if you're afraid, meaning even if you have a little bit concern that you are going to be tempted to potentially take advantage of orphan girls by marrying them once they reach maturity because they have money, it's saying then don't do that. Then marry other women of your choice. So don't take this temptation, go and marry somebody else. And then it says 2, 3, or 4. So this is the verse that talks about the ability for a man to take up to 4 wives. And then we're going to discuss this in a moment. فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا فَوَاحِدَةً أَوْ مَا مَلَكَتْ أَيْمَانُكُمْ. If you are afraid that you will not be just, exactly what it said before. So it says if you're afraid that you're going to take advantage of orphans, then don't do that. Don't take advantage of them, do something else. If you're afraid by marrying more than one, if you marry 2, 3, or 4, and you're afraid that you're not going to be just to more than one wife by taking 2, 3, or 4, then marry only one. You look at the similar wording. If you're afraid of this, then do this. And if you're afraid of this, then do this. Or or a servant girl. Right? So a servant girl, without going into all the details of what that means, basically someone who has much lower standards for marriage than a wealthy orphan girl or the other girls who are not in the category of being servants, slaves, things like that. ذَلِكَ أَدْنَى أَلَّا تَعُولُوا. That makes you less likely to be unjust. It says this is the option, this is what you should go for because you are protecting yourself. And if you protect yourself, then you're less likely to fall into doing something that is forbidden in Islam. So you should do that. So let me comment on a few points here. Number one, what does it mean to be just? Right? It says Allah ta'dilu. So being just means, I have a few things here. So justice is in things which can be measured, right? Things which are apparent. So the amount of time that you spend with somebody, the amount of money that you spend on somebody, general care and things like that. Things that cannot be measured is like a natural inclination of inclining towards one person over another and giving them a little bit, more attention, but not purposely doing something like that. These are things which you cannot necessarily control. They just naturally come to you. So Allah is saying that you have to make sure that you're going to be just to all of the wives if you marry more than one. So this is point number one. Point number two, I want to read a passage because one of the things that a lot of people struggle with, I think maybe more women struggle with it, more guys joke about it and they're like, this is my favorite verse and all that stuff. And then when their wife sees them saying that, then all of a sudden their face changes and they run away and they're like, I was just kidding, honey, and then they don't get dinner at night and all sorts of weird things happen, right? I see this all the time in the community, right? That's why, because this is a mixed class, this is a brothers only class, you see all these guys with big smiles on their face and everything, and as soon as they're, it's a mixed class, all of a sudden their faces, come back, right? So, anyways, so there's a quote here by, I believe she was a Christian, English Christian missionary, and she's addressing at a very important point. This is a really old quote, but I like these old quotes sometimes. They're nicer. So a lot of people struggle to understand the idea of men being allowed to marry more than one wife. What's called polygyny. Polygamy means multiple spouses. Polyandry means a woman taking more than one husband, and polygyny with G means a man taking more than one wife. So there's two quotes I want to mention here. One of them is, where is it? Hold on one second. No, okay, I just have one quote then. So one quote is by Miss Annie Besant, and she is criticizing her Christian countrymen for always looking down upon Islam and mocking and making fun of Islam because they allow polygyny, a limited form of polygyny. So she says polygamy was the rule. Oh yeah, this is the quote, Roberts. Polygamy was the rule among the Eastern peoples before Muhammad's time. So this was something that was natural and normal in most Eastern peoples before the Quran was revealed. And what happens is people have a difficult time understanding this because it's not the norm in the world today. And because it's not the norm in the world today, it looks like Islam is the exception and it introduced this concept into the world. But it's not the case. The reality was, it was the norm when the Quran was revealed among many peoples throughout history. And the Quran actually came and restricted it because people used to have unlimited wives. They could have 10 wives and they could have 20 wives. There were some companions, they had 10 wives. And when the verse came down, it said, you're not allowed to have that 10 wives. You're only allowed to have a maximum of 4. So, and this is mentioned in the Bible and so many other places. So Miss Annie Besant says, when we see thousands, and this is a very old quote, this is like about 100 years old. She says, when we see thousands of miserable women who crowd the streets of Western towns during the night, we must surely feel that it does not lie in the Western mouth to reproach Islam for its polygamy. It is better for a woman, happier for a woman, more respectable for a woman to live in Muhammadan, she means Islam, to live in Muhammadan polygamy, united to one man only with a legitimate child in her arms, surrounded with respect, than to be seduced, cast out in the streets, perhaps with an illegitimate child outside the pale of law, unsheltered and uncared for, to become a victim of any passer-by night after night, rendered incapable of motherhood, despised of all. So anyways, that's a pretty nice quote that basically compares that if anyone's going to criticize Islam because it allows this in a very restricted form, and they're not going to look at what's happening in society today, in modern Western society today, and not make any type of comments about which, if you had to choose really between two options, which one is the better option? You have to be in a state of, people think that they're morally superior, when they're making this, they're looking down upon Islam. You need to have the moral, what's the right word? You need the moral what? No. You need to have the moral standing to be able to make such a claim, right? It's like a criminal is like looking at someone else. Imagine like Netanyahu, like looking at someone saying, "Look at that guy! I can't believe you killed somebody. You killed a person." It's like Fir'aun. Fir'aun looks at Musa. He's like, "You punched a person and he died. How could you do this?" And like Fir'aun's killing people left and right. Right? So you need to have that moral stance before you can even look down upon or try and make an accusation against somebody else. So anyways, that's polygamy in a nutshell. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that. And there's a really good article here by Maulana Daryabadi in his Tafseer. It's a few pages long, but it's one of the best articles I've seen explaining the wisdom and rationale behind polygamy. But we'll continue inshallah. What time do we have? It's last verse. And then Allah says, وَآتُوا النِّسَاءَ صَدُقَاتِهِنَّ نِحْلَةً. Give women their marriage gift happily. So meaning, the word saduqat comes from sadaq or sidaq. Sadaq means mahr. Mahr means bridal gift or dowry. So it says, give women, when you're marrying them, give them their bridal gift. Nihla means happily, lovingly, not feeling like you're forced to do it, not like it's a transaction. So why is this significant, by the way? This is very important because the idea of a bridal gift or a dowry, or what's called dower sometimes, has many societies had this concept of a bridal gift or a dower, not always a bridal gift. Sometimes it's a husband gift. So for example, in Hindu culture, if a couple is getting married, who has to give who money for the marriage to take place? The woman's family has to give to the husband's family or to the husband, and as kind of like, please take this woman off my hands from me. Right? That's pretty bad. That's pretty sad. And then you have this other the concept of, in Arabian culture and many other cultures, the idea of giving the family of the bride the gift rather than the wife herself the gift was very common. And it was seen as an economic contract. It was seen as basically like you're basically purchasing, somebody for marriage. So this verse of the Quran is very powerful because what it's doing is it's saying, number one, three things it's saying. Number one, that the bridal gift, the mahar, the dowry, is going from the husband to the wife, not the other way around. Number two, it's going to the bride, not to the bride's family. So her family has nothing to do with it. It's not, they can advise her and stuff. It's not, they can't touch a dollar of it. It's hers. And number three, it's saying you do it happily, not as a transaction. You're doing it's a gift, a required gift, but it's a gift that is done not looking at, okay, here you go, I have to do this or whatever it may be. That's not the way it's supposed to be viewed. فَإِن طِبْنَ لَكُمْ عَنْ شَيْءٍ مِّنْهُ نَفْسًا فَكُلُوهُ هَنِيئًا مَرِيئًا. If they give up some of it willingly, it means if the women who are receiving the mahar or the bridal gift, if they're willing to give up some of it on their own, then you can enjoy it happily. You don't have to feel guilty. You don't have to feel bad. You're allowed to take it back. And it's so interesting, the language here. So it's basically the first language is when you're giving the mahar, you should be happy about it. And if she's giving up back some of her mahar, you can take it happily. So everyone can be happy. Everyone should be happy. So this happens sometimes, is that, you know what? You say, okay, you promised me $10,000 as my, mahar, or $5,000 as my mahar. You know what? I actually don't need that much from you. Give me half of that. It's more than enough. I know your financial situation is not the best or whatever it is. And then how should the guy react to that? Allah tells you, react to it happily. So give it happily. And if she's like, no, it's okay, giving you back a little bit, take it back happily. Very simple. So alhamdulillah, Islam keeps things very simple and easy. Inshallah, we'll stop there because it's time. And there's supposed to be a quiz. Is that right? Where's the quiz? How long is this quiz going to take? Huh? 6 questions? Okay, not bad. I have no idea what's going to happen here because it's not a Kahoot. So we'll take some questions and we'll take the quiz and then we'll take some questions, inshallah. Huh? I have no idea. Where is it? Verbally or what? It's verbal questions. Okay, go. Bismillah.
So we're still going to do a whole team thing, so people should get into teams as well.
Okay, so teams. Everyone get into teams of 3 or 4? Teams of 3 or 4. Winner gets what? A bag of candy? The winner gets a bag of candy. All right. It's a bag of chocolate? A bag of chocolate. Okay. Good. Okay. You going to read the question too? Okay. Everyone got their teams? Show me one team. Raise your hand. One leader, team leader. Only the team leader. There's got to be a leader for every team, by the way. How many teams do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Jabir, your own team? Okay, 7. We got 7 teams. And 8. Okay, we got 8 teams. Okay, good. Let's start it. First question.
How much of the orphan's property do you give to them?
Okay, so I'm gonna call on somebody. Okay, I'm gonna call on Team Isa. Give all of it. Okay. Do they get all of it when they're kids still? Do they get all of it when they're kids, the orphans? No. Okay, good. When do they get it? When they're what? Well, okay, when their father dies, the property is there. When do they actually get it in their hands? When do they actually receive it, like all of it in their hands? When they're adults, correct. Very good. 1 point. All right, next question.
What should someone do with the money Allah has given them?
What should someone do with the money Allah has given them? Oh, what should they do to their family with the money that Allah has given them? Team? Yes. They should use it wisely and give it to the poor. And to their family as well? Yes, good, correct.
1 point.
1 point. Next question.
Okay. What does it mean to be just with them? When you're talking about treating people.
The wives. Okay. So the question is, so what does it mean to be just to your wives? Go ahead, back. Huh? To be fair, you need something more than that. Huh? Give them what? Treat them equally. That's the same as fair. More details. Okay. Another team. Okay, go ahead. All right, good. So financial and time spent. Very good. Huh? Okay.
1 point.
All right, 1 point. That's fine.
All right, last question.
Yes.
If a wife gives up part of her gift, what can the man do to it?
Okay, if the wife gives up part of her gift, what can the man do to it? This team over here. They what? Accept it happily. Very good. Okay.
1 point.
Excellent. 1 point.
So you need to come up with a tiebreaker question so we can get the gift.
A tiebreaker question? So, okay.
Yes.
Someone has to get the gift through a tiebreaker question. Okay, let me see. It's only the people who got a point so far already.
Yeah.
All right, so, okay, I got a good tiebreaker question. What was the name of the council that debated whether women have a soul, and in which century did it occur? Did you already have a point though? You didn't have a point yet. So, Isa? Okay, Isa had a point. Yeah, Isa, go ahead. Did you say Trent? No, century? What's a century? Consult with your team. 16th century, Council of Trent. You got it. Got the bag of candy, mashallah. Very good. All right, inshallah. There are cookies in the cafe, inshallah. Does anyone have any? We'll take a few minutes for questions. Any questions from what we covered today? Anyone? Okay, Jabir, go ahead.
First question. Why was there no Tafseer class last week?
Why was there no Tafseer class last week? Because of the UCI encampment. We were, yeah.
Number 2,
No, wait, come back to you. You answered your one question. Go ahead, Hamza, not Hamza. Ali. Yeah, can everyone please be quiet so I can hear I can hear Ali? Thank you. Go ahead.
So some of the inheritance back then was animals. So what if the animals died by the time the kids
Okay, so if the animals died by the time, that's a good question. If the animals died by the time the kids hit the age of maturity, that's the job of the guardian to take care of the animals and to sell them off or use their meat or something like that before they would lose all of their potential. Because animals have this risk and benefit. So if an animal dies, you just lost a lot of money. If an animal gives birth, you just made a lot of money. So it's kind of like there's a risk and there's a potential for benefit. All right, so great question. Alhamdulillah. All right. Last question here. Yeah, it's the potential to be taken advantage of. There's a shared element between orphans and between women, especially in a male-dominant society. Okay. All right, inshallah. So there are cookies in the cafe. We'll be distributing them and milk as well, inshallah. So we'll see you next week. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Assalamu alaikum.
Okay, that's what cookie.
Thank you.